welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual reader's guide to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm Nick Gorman, your co-host, Reddit and meme enthusiast, your creme posting enthusiast.
And I'm your other co-host, AJ, or Abby Gorman. I forget which one I normally do.
This is like our fourth episode, or our third episode. You can still pick. Fourth.
I'm your co-host, AJ Gorman, and I am still just a reader of Brandon Sanderson, and that's it.
I don't know. In our last episode, you were just talking about how this is becoming like a research project for you.
Yeah, it is consuming a lot of my life.
Shucks.
What little there is left to consume after children.
Yeah, right. So, for this episode, we're talking about Elantris and what...
This is our pre-read episode.
Yeah, what you should know going into Elantris. And to an extent, right, this was the first published book that Brandon Sanderson wrote.
That's correct.
So it's not like, you don't need to write anything first because there was no Cosmere before Elantris, right?
Well, there was a Cosmere, just no, it was all in Brandon's head.
Okay. But, I mean, I think comparing Elantris to the rest of Brando Sando's publications... it was his first one, and, he isn't really known for his flowery prose in general, right? Like, if you're comparing writing styles between him and other authors, his writing is easy to read and understand.
This is not Tolkien.
Right. He's not,
Thank goodness.
He's not Tolkien, he's not Melville, he's not Faulkner. But this book, in particular, feels choppier compared to even his second book, Mistborn: The Final Empire, right?
Yeah, if you were to read all of Brandon Sanderson's books without really knowing a whole lot about the publishing history, you would more or less immediately identify this as most likely his first published.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's one of those things where I think, when I came in for my first, read of Elantris, my very first time, I had already read several other Cosmere works, so I noticed it right away, but other people I know started with Elantris said, it's great. It's easy to read. It's an easy way to get into.
I'm one of those people. I think Elantris might have been my second book. Like, I think I might have started with Final Empire, and then I went to Elantris, and I really like Elantris still. Yeah. I liked it then. I still really like it now. But it is, on this reread in particular, I start to notice, like, the writing isn't as... nice as,
like I said, it's choppy.
Yeah. But it is shorter. Yeah. Which is nice.
What, you mean you don't want to start out, you don't want every book to be 1,000-page epic like Stormlight Archive?
Well, it's nice to be able to read it in chunks because that's my lifestyle right now. Fair. And to still be able to finish it within like Fair. A month or two instead of it taking like a year.
Yeah. Well, and before we talk about like what's going on in the books, the other thing I wanted to mention is that there's different editions of this book available. Like there's the first edition book, and then there's the 10th anniversary author's definitive edition. And I guess full disclosure, AJ and I have both only read the original, the first edition, right? Like we've read it on multiple mediums at this point. We got the audiobook and the mass market paperback, but somehow we both times we ended up with the original, even though we just missed it, I guess. By the time we record our post read book, I'll have got the 10th anniversary edition, and I'll be able to talk to some of the differences. But if you're looking at your book and it starts out with a foreword by Dan Wells, or if there is a chapter titled Postscript, that's the anniversary edition, which includes just a little bit extra.
Well, I'm trying to look to see if it's on... I should have done this before. I'm trying to see if the postscript is on Brandon's website.
It is not.
It's not?
It is not.
Stupid publishers.
I know, right? It's like
definitely the publisher's fault because
want
Brandon...
an incentive for people to buy the new edition, right? Or, just check it out from the library, which might or might not be what I'm doing right now.
If it was up to Brandon, he would have it on the website.
I mean, speaking of things that are on Brando Sando's website, publishing. There are annotations available. But I will say, if this is your first read-through on Elantris, even he doesn't recommend reading them because they break up the flow of the book, And, sometimes the annotations contain spoilers, although they are usually, tagged and or hidden.
I also do want to say, more or less at the beginning of the episode, even though we're a few minutes in, I think Elantris is a great place to start with if you are just getting into the Cosmere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's certainly not bad.
I wish I had started here instead of Mistborn.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got mixed feelings. Do you want to talk about,
Well, it's just it's shorter. It's just a one-off. Like Mistborn, you're kind of in it for the whole trilogy. Yeah. If you're just thinking of Era 1, whereas Elantris, it's just a single book.
There's no real cliffhangers at the end of Elantris, whereas Mistborn.
I mean, there are loose threads, of course. It's Brandon,
but
it's a more or less a complete story.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I mean, depending on what you're into, right? Like, it's got the typical Brandon Sanderson hallmarks that his strengths are very much still his strengths with this, right? Where the prose, the language is easy to read. The pacing is, that style.
You still get the Sanderlanche at the end.
Yeah, you still get the Sanderlanche at the end. You've still got, the magic system is fantastic. The world building is really good. Like it.
He tries to avoid tropes. Like it's all very classic Sanderson.
I mean, you can't.
He tries to subvert tropes.
Yeah, I would say he uses them to his advantage, right?
But anyways, I did want to say that it's full on Sanderson. It's not the best of Sanderson, but it's a good place to start if you're looking for an in with not a whole lot of commitment.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of want to get into like what the premise is and like what to look out for.
Okay, but first I want to talk about the title.
Oh God.
What do you mean? Oh God.
I mean,
it's very quick.
Okay, go on ahead.
It brings in one of my other passions, Greek mythology, because the original name for Elantris was Adonis, because Aeondor, Ado, Adonis. But anyways, but that is actually a pretty well-known figure in Greek mythology. So a lot of his beta readers were like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out like what this has to do with Greek mythology. And Brandon was like, oh, egg on my face. I didn't mean to bring Greek mythology into this. So he switched it to Elantris. So he was borrowing heavily from Atlantis, trying to, get your brain semi-conscious into thinking of mythological realms and power and whatnot. So
and lost civilizations.
So he was borrowing. So if you think it sounds a little bit like Atlantis, that's on purpose.
Yeah. Although I think Dan Wells includes that story in the foreword, from what I understand, about how writing group caught him on it. What happened to Adonis? Where'd the Greek mythology come in? Where'd the Greek connection come? What? So
well, what are friends for?
Yeah.
Except to embarrass you in your forwards.
Yeah. Well, Well, it's funny now. Dan Wells is an employee of Brandon's.
Yes.
So I don't think he was at the time you wrote the forward, but they're a long.
No, I believe it's recent.
Yeah. Anyway, premise: Elantris is or was the city of the gods, and I mean honestly, the one-page prologue at the beginning does a fantastic job of setting up the setting, and it's like really dramatic. But I guess in an even shorter nutshell. People in the country of Aerilon are sometimes randomly struck by a transformation called the Sheod, and the people who are chosen become Elantrians. They become supernaturally beautiful, able to use a kind of rune magic called Aeondor or Aeons, and through that magic they could do great things, and they lived and they acted like they were gods, and they ruled the Aerilon from their city of Elantris. But 10 years ago, something happened and Elantris just fell from grace. The magic suddenly stopped, and the Elantrians, rather than being resplendent, beautiful gods, became basically shambling zombies. People continued to transform into Elantrians, but instead of being a blessing, it became a curse. So today, the kingdom of Erelon is run by kind of the incompetent king Iadon, and is on the brink of tearing itself apart.
So I take issue with the whole zombie connotation.
I don't know. I can't get around it. Like they refer to themselves as already dead multiple times.
I see it, but I didn't zombies didn't come to mind when I read the book. But as soon as somebody said zombies, and I was like, yeah.
They're the living dead, dear.
I guess, but they're not. They're just.
They're not.
I don't like it. I don't like describing it as a zombie book.
I mean, they all, the reader will get into it, but
I'm just glad that Brandon never used the word, even though that would be totally out of world to say zombie. I think.
I mean,
I don't know. Anyways, I don't like that description.
Well, shucks. So, maybe not Elantrians are zombies in the current story, but they used to be glorious, and now they're decrepit.
Yes, and this is 10 years after that changed.
Yeah.
So we're not right at a lot of people have kind of forgotten the old ways. It's been long enough that everybody's just kind of set in the new way of things.
Yeah. So the book follows 3 people and their storylines, right? So Prince Raoden of Erelon is, the incompetent king Iadon's son, and he wakes up, the second page of the book.
There's a thorn in his father's side.
Yeah. And he wakes up and he finds that he's become an Elantrian. So he is unceremoniously cast into Elantris and kind of becomes hell-bent on bringing hope to its people, and also at the same time discovering what happened to the magic of Elantris. So he's got sort of a political connotation to his storyline, but it's also a mystery, right?
And then we've got Serene.
I want to get to her storylines third, because it really makes the most sense after you talk about Wraithens, right?
All right.
So Jorn Wraithen of Fjordell is a high priest, a missionary, and ambassador all in one. He arrives in Erelon just after Raoden dies. And he's kind of on a secret mission from the head of his country and religion to convert the people of Erelon, or else they need to become members of the Drethai faith, or else they will all die in a crusade. He's sort of the villain of the book, but he's also a main point of view character and incredibly sympathetic. One of my favorite characters in the book. And then he's the antagonist. The person he's antagonizing is Princess Serene of Teod.
I don't know if I would say that. I would say Serene inserted herself to become an opponent.
Yes.
It's not like Wraithen went to Erelon and said,
well,
I'm going to annoy this princess.
I think we're going to
He didn't even know that she was going to be there.
I think we're going to quibble about it in the next book, or in the next episode of this, because, there's the historical backdrop. Anyway, it goes into the whole world building of the thing, whether he's anyway.
All of this that we're talking about, you learn in the very first chapters.
Yeah.
So none of it's spoiler.
Yeah. So Serene was engaged to marry Raoden before he dies, and she arrives in the same, basically the same day as his funeral. So she arrives in a strange country. She's basically friendless. She's married to a dead guy, and she's making
because the wedding contract stipulated if either one of them were to die, that they're legally married. So she got married without having a wedding or anything.
Yes, but because it's an arranged political marriage. Anyway, but she's trying to make her way through court and do that as well. She's got firsthand experience in her home country of Teod, having a conflict with the Drethai that Wraithen represents.
The whole reason why she married Raoden was to help fight the Drethai, because they are the last 2 countries not run by the Drethai priest. Yeah. So she has incentive to stay in Erelon and help fight against the Drethai priest.
Yeah. So, and she also thinks that, not necessarily wrongly, that the missionaries from the Durethi tend to lead coups.
Yes, but maybe we should leave that in the book. Maybe not discuss that too much further.
Yep. So that's the three main plot lines, and you can kind of see how they're going to weave, from there.
So I don't know if you've noticed this, but Brandon had a very strict writing structure to this book. For almost the entire book, the three you get, Raiden, I think it's Raiden, Serene, Wraithen, and it goes in that order all the way through. He never like skips a person and goes back. Like, you always get it in that order.
Interesting. Up until the Sanderlanche.
But for most of the book, it's at that. Apparently, it's like a writing the triad system, chapter triads. But the point is, the ultimate goal is to write those from points of view that are happening at the same time. Brandon had loosened it a little bit, so they're all happening like the same day.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think there are some instances, but
yeah. Well, I think his overall goal was that, the point of views are happening about the same time.
Yeah.
But he ended up loosening it to the same day. But I didn't really notice that.
Oh. Well, it's not, yeah, I don't know.
I guess I noticed in other books, I am, like, dying to get back to another character because an author will, like, leave it on a cliffhanger and, oh, no, I want more of this character because I like this character better. And I get annoyed because it takes a while for them to get back to that character because maybe their story is a little bit shorter. But you don't really have that problem with Elantris because it is very regular. You always know what character is going to be next, and
yeah, you never spend too long with one character. There's
Wraithen chapters are shorter.
Leaves you wanting more.
I think they're really good. I think it would have been not good to have Brandon lengthen them just for the sake of having them the same length. Yeah. But they're a very different feeling from the Raiden and Serene chapters.
Yeah.
We should talk about the names a little bit. I have a beef with Brandon. Why does he always put silent letters in front of some of his main characters' names? Because Wraithen starts with an H.
Well, and he comes from the country of Fjordell, which looks a little bit like the borrowed word fjord, from Swedish. It's like it's clearly not it's supposed to evoke a foreign sense where there's a language is being transliterated into the main character's language.
I mean, I suppose it's so hard to translate. Like when you're talking to someone about the Cosmere, you realize that some people pronounce the characters different ways than you do, and sometimes it takes a while to figure out what character are you talking about.
Oh my god, yeah, no, and especially it is the worst with Elantris because all right, that's Stormlight, and we're doing a pre-read here, but for this one, like I remember because we got it on audiobook first, and so where Jorn starts with a G, and I had no freaking clue. What the heck are people talking about? What? Jorn? Let's say, what's a Giorn? Oh, wait a minute. Now they say it out loud. And there's at least one character who shows up in a later book in the Cosmere, whose name I just completely did not recognize. So in Erelon, all the people who are from Erelon, where all the action takes place, all of the vowels in their names are long. So your main characters are Ray, O, Den. I guess the
first two vowels are hard.
You mean long? Where it's not Ra-O, it's not Ra-O-Den, it's Ray, O, Den. And then it's Kai, Ein, and Duke, Tel, Rai, I, right? Even though it's Telrii, that's how they pronounce it.
And if you notice, we're not using that pronunciation guide with Serene because
she's
Serene,
from a different country.
Well, no, it's just because we like the sound of Serene in our mouths better.
Wow. That's how they pronounce it in the audiobook, too. Oh.
the audiobook narrators don't always coordinate with Brandon. So sometimes, a lot of times, they do not pronounce the names correctly. Now, Brandon doesn't necessarily care about this. He says, whatever way you want to pronounce it is fine. But it can lead to some confusion when other people are talking about things together.
So, themes in this book. Is there anything else we want to talk about with the way the book is written?
No, we can talk about themes.
So, the themes that stand out to me in this book, if you're, looking, is this the right book for me to start? One of the overarching themes of this book is optimism and persistence, where each of our three main characters repeatedly face terrible setbacks or overwhelming odds, but they all push through the pain.
Persevere.
Yeah, they persevere, right? And it's very hopeful. And I think that is, even more so than Brando Sando's other works. Is this one is mostly about like the power of hope and perseverance.
Brandon himself considers himself an optimist, and I think this really kind of shows through for him in Raiden particularly.
Yeah.
Which some people feel like is a fault. They think that Raiden feels too good to...
It feels kind of shallow or one bit.
Yeah.
Right? Especially compared to some of the characters from Brando's later works, but I mean, he's still a complex
I don't mind
character,
it. I like reading about nice characters.
Yeah, and I mean, it's only, if you look at this in a vacuum, he's still, still a pretty complex character, right?
Right.
Something else I noticed in this, as a theme was like there was a lot of, talk about like self-determinism and dealing with imposter syndrome. I mean, they don't call it that, but again, each of the main characters has some major internal conflict relating to they don't think that they are the person they're supposed to be. Where Rathan the priest has a crisis of faith, Raoden the prince struggles with wanting to be a leader, and Serene the princess, who's constantly viewed one of her main goals in life is to get married, is constantly
thinking that she has no place in the world.
Yeah, no place in the world, and especially when she's effectively married to a corpse, she doesn't have any marriage prospects,
and she can't remarry.
Yeah,
or else she gives up the wealth status. Yeah, diplomatic. Yeah.
So it's that like I said, they all have that conflict, and there's the through line between them. And similar to before, like they all do push through it in different ways.
Yeah, and a lot of that ties into religion. So Brandon himself is of the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. Mormon. Yeah.
Obviously, I know a whole lot about that.
Yeah.
But anyways, you wouldn't really necessarily know that from reading his books. He does try. He gives his different characters. Some are atheists, some are religious, some are not religious, and he plays a lot with different theologies.
Yeah.
Is that the right word that I want?
Yeah. Well, and I think yes, because there are several different religions in this book, and they are all pretty well developed. But what I thought was interesting was Brando Sando, he's been a missionary before, right? But he's still the main point of view villain antagonist in this book is Rathan, who is a missionary, and I thought, that's really interesting.
Well, I've got a quote from him on that. Because there's another character in the book for another religion that is kind of questionable. But he says on that, the idea that a religion is more than its leader and faith is more powerful than one man. I think that for any religion to last, it needs to be able to survive in spite of the people who run it rather than just because of them.
Nice.
So there's a lot of play with religion, more in this book than any other, I think, of the Cosmere.
Maybe. I think this has got to be one of the main ones, but it does play a major role, especially in Stormlight and in Mistborn Era 2 as well. I do think religion in how they impact society and whatever comes up repeatedly through the Cosmere.
Yeah.
Something else that comes up as I do kind of think it's secondary compared to that theme of persistence and optimism, but like one of the main drivers of this story is the mystery of, you know, what happened to Elantris 10 years ago and what happened to the magic. And certainly with Raoden's plotline, it's a main focus of his, but it comes up in everybody's. So if there's a sense of discovery, I guess, that comes through.
Yeah.
I would say you're shaking your head, but it's an audio medium, so I'm just going to say, I think so, when we can disagree and talk about it next episode.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, I guess, do you have any other themes you want to talk about? No? So I want to talk about World Hoppers to keep an eye out for. This was Brando's first published book, so there's nobody who's been in other books first, because there was none. If you're playing Where's Waldo with Hoyd, he does appear in this book. Towards the end. Yeah. I will say, if you're listening to the audiobook, they pronounce his name Hoide, in keeping with how Aeons are pronounced. So if you're used to seeing or thinking Hoyd, it's different. Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of content, warnings, because sometimes Brando, has excessive violence or things like that. There's nothing really objectionable in this one, I don't think. There's a couple of fantasy violence scenes, but I mean, nothing too out there. And I guess the only other thing to mention is, in later published books, Brando Sando does a pretty good job with representation, including things like disabled characters and stuff like that in a very realistic way. And in Elantris, he's got one autistic coded character that, by his current standards is a bit clumsy. Mm-hmm. So that's, I guess, the only other thing to mention. It's like, well, if that's going to rub you the wrong way, just
he gets better.
He gets better, right?
He gets better.
He didn't have the when he wrote this, he didn't have access to things like subject matter experts who
I just don't think he had the time, because he does talk with people. He talks with atheists or like other as background research for his characters, but this was his first published novel. I think he was writing this when he was working as a night hotel clerk. Yeah. So yeah, he just didn't. It gets better. He has more time to do research later on in his career.
Yeah.
But Elantris is still one of my favorites.
That's good.
Highly recommend it.
And I just recommend it. But so this has been Cosmere Casual. If you have any feedback for us, our email address is cosmerecasual@gmail.com. Let us know if you've got any questions or something you want us to talk about, or just feedback.
And until then, keep your wits about you.